All right, today we are going to crack open your brain, figuratively, of course. We're going to look at the two competing systems that are constantly battling to control your every single decision. This all comes from the incredible work of Daniel Kahneman, and it helps us understand why our minds are basically hardwired to make the same mistakes over and over, and more importantly, what you can do to start outsmarting yourself.
So I want to start you off with a little puzzle. And I mean, it seems so simple. But what's wild is that more than half of all Harvard students get this thing wrong. Yeah, Harvard. It's a perfect example of this fundamental glitch in how all of our brains work. So take a look. What is the very first answer that just pops into your head? Don't overthink it.
Okay, if you're like, well, pretty much everyone, your brain probably just shouted 10 cents, right? I mean, it just feels right. It's quick, it's easy, it comes to you in a flash. That's your fast brain, your gut, jumping in. And it's totally wrong.
The right answer is actually 5 cents. Let's just do the math real quick. If the ball is 5 cents and the bat costs $1 more than the ball, that makes the bat $1.05. Add them together and you get $1.10. Boom. See? The fact that 10 cents feels so obviously right but is so clearly wrong is the perfect window into these two, let's call them characters, that are always fighting for control inside your head. Now, Kahneman gives these two characters names, System 1 and System 2. Think of System 1 as your gut. It's the fast, automatic, intuitive pilot that's always on. System 2, on the other hand, that's your conscious, analytical brain. It's the slow, careful, effortful co-pilot that has to be woken up to solve the tough problems. And here's the kicker. Most of the time, System 1 is flying the plane, and System 2 is just kicked back, napping in the cockpit.
And this is the whole point of Kahneman's work, right here. The problem isn't that your gut, System 1, is stupid. It's not. The real issue is that your conscious mind, System 2, is, well, it's lazy. It's incredibly lazy. It runs on what Kahneman calls the law of least effort. Thinking hard burns actual calories, you know? So to save energy, it usually just accepts whatever System 1 suggests without a second thought. It just rubber stamps the decision. And that laziness, right there, is the source of so many of our most common mental mistakes.
Okay, so now that we've got that framework, the fast System 1 and the lazy System 2, let's dive into the first big mental glitch this creates. It's called anchoring, and it's all about how a completely random, totally irrelevant number can sneak in and hijack your judgment without you ever seeing it coming.
All right, I'm going to try something on you right now. Just look at this number on the screen. 114. Got it? Just lock that number in your head for a second.
Okay, now answer this question for me. Did Gandhi die before or after the age of 114? I mean, obviously the answer is before, right? That's the easy part. But here's the trick. What you don't realize is that by just asking you that question, I've planted an invisible anchor deep inside your brain.
And this is where it gets fascinating. What they find in experiments is that when you show people a high number first, like 114, and then ask them to guess Gandhi's actual age at death, their guesses are way, way higher than people who are first shown a low number. That first number, even though you know it's totally random, it acts like a magnet. It secretly pulls your own guess closer to it without your permission.
And listen, this isn't just some cute party trick. Anchors are absolutely everywhere. The asking price for a house? That's an anchor. The first number thrown out in a salary negotiation? A huge anchor. Even that limit 12 per customer sign at the supermarket, that's an anchor designed to make you buy more than you otherwise would. They all work by setting a starting point that frames every decision you make after that.
All right, let's move on to the next one. This mental glitch explains why we are so bad at judging risk, why we're often terrified of the wrong things. It really comes down to a battle in our heads. Dramatic, vivid stories versus cold, boring data. This one's called the availability heuristic. Basically, when we need to figure out how common something is, our brain takes a lazy shortcut. Instead of digging up actual statistics, because that's hard, it just asks a much simpler question. How easily can I remember an example of this? And if an example pops into your head really quickly and vividly, your brain just assumes it must happen all the time. And you can see the result of that shortcut right here. Just look at the difference between how we perceive the risk of shark attacks versus something like stomach cancer. Shark attacks are terrifying, they make the news, the images are burned into our brains, so we think they're a huge risk. But in reality, they're incredibly rare. Meanwhile, we totally underestimate silent killers like stomach cancer, which are statistically way more dangerous, just because they don't have that same Hollywood drama attached to them. And the consequences here are massive. This completely warps our personal fears, and it even shapes public policy. It means we're making decisions based on media hype instead of actual data. This can lead to something called an availability cascade, where a small threat gets picked up by the news, which makes people scared, which leads to more news coverage, which makes more people scared, and pretty soon, a minor issue has been blown up into mass panic.
All right, this next one, this one might be my favorite, because it shows just how much our fast-thinking System 1 loves a good story. It loves a coherent narrative so much that it will literally break the basic rules of logic just to make the story fit. Okay, so I want to introduce you to someone. This is Linda. Take a look at her profile. She's 31, single, really outspoken, majored in philosophy in college, and she's super passionate about social justice issues. You've probably already got a pretty clear picture of her in your mind, right? Now here's the question. Which of these two scenarios is more probable? A, Linda is a bank teller, or B, Linda is a bank teller and is active in the feminist movement. Now for most people, the answer is just obvious. B, right? It just feels right. It fits the story of Linda we just created in our heads.
But here's the glitch. Option B is logically impossible to be more probable than option A. Just think about it with a simple Venn diagram. The group of all bank tellers is a big circle. The group of feminist bank tellers is a smaller circle that has to exist completely inside the bigger one. So there's no way it can be more probable. But because feminist bank teller tells a much better story about Linda, our fast, intuitive System 1 completely steamrolls the actual logic. That's called the conjunction fallacy.
So, okay, we've seen how these invisible anchors, these vivid but rare events, and these plausible-sounding stories can mess with our thinking. And you might be feeling like, man, are we just hopelessly flawed? But here's the good news. Once you can put a name to these mental glitches, you can actually start to debug your own mental software. So how do we do that? How do we wake up that lazy System 2 when we really need it? Well, it's kind of like a three-step process. First, you just have to learn to recognize when you're walking into a cognitive minefield. A high-stakes decision where a mistake would really cost you. Second, when you feel that super strong, instant gut reaction, just pause. Hit the brakes. Ask yourself, wait a second, is there another way to look at this? And third, you have to deliberately, consciously slow down. Force yourself to put in the mental sweat and actually think the problem through, step by step. Now, let's be clear. The goal here is not to second-guess every single thought you have. That would be exhausting. Your System 1 is amazing. It's what lets you drive a car and have a conversation at the same time. We literally couldn't function without it. The real goal is to build the wisdom to know the difference, to know when a quick gut check is fine, and when a situation is important enough that you really need to slam on the brakes and let your slower, more careful brain take the wheel. But here's maybe the biggest, and honestly, the most humbling insight from all of Kahneman's research. Even after hearing all of this, you are still going to fall for these traps. I am. We all are. And why is that? It's because our brains are fantastically good at spotting these mental glitches in other people. We're almost blind to them in ourselves. And that, believe it or not, brings us to what Kahneman said was his real goal. He suggested that the biggest benefit of his work wasn't necessarily fixing your own brain, but giving us a shared, smarter language to talk about how other people make decisions. When you can point to something and say, that's an anchoring effect, or they're falling for an availability cascade, it just elevates the whole conversation. He had this great line. He called it the basis for informed gossip. So, I'll leave you with this question. Now that you have the vocabulary for this, now that you can see the invisible machinery working behind the scenes, you can spot that lazy controller, you can see those seductive mental shortcuts. Whose decisions are you going to start seeing in a completely different light? Your boss's? Your friends? Maybe, just maybe, even your own?